All right, I am now recording. So as I was saying, we're going to try to give you an overview, our best guess as to the construction timeline in Southwood, and Mandy and Dom will share some examples of the construction process that we've seen in other neighborhoods, which can give us an idea. So one thing that's important for everybody to know is that although, of course, coronavirus has affected a lot of things in the world right now, we don't think, we are still planning to meet the same timeline as we were planning before. It has not slowed down our construction timeline. So we are not planning, although we talked to some of you about maybe changing the timeline to apply to the Habitat program. But that's separate from the construction process. The construction is still going to be happening at the same pace that we thought it would. So with that, and as you all pointed out, there's a lot of factors that we are considering, and we're going to hear about what some of those things are tonight. So you've mentioned some of them, and Mandy and Dom are going to share some of what those things look like in the Habitat construction team. So Dom and Mandy, could you wave your hands again? So Dom and Mandy work over at that main office of Habitat. Dom is the director of construction. So he sort of runs the construction team. And Mandy does the land development. So she works on everything leading up to when they start building the houses. So I'm going to turn it over to them to talk a little bit about what this, what kinds of stuff they do and how it's worked in other neighborhoods.
Okay, thanks, Molly. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully that will work. Oops. Okay, does everyone see that? Yeah, okay, great. Thank you, Molly. So as Molly mentioned, I'm Mandy, and I do all the land development work for Habitat. Dom and I are both going to talk tonight about a project that we recently, well, we're nearing completion on, but it's our most recent neighborhood that we've developed called Harmony Ridge, which I'm sure everyone is familiar with because it's located on 5th Street and you probably drive by it every day. And we just wanted to use it as a case study example to illustrate what the sort of major steps are in the site development process, and help you kind of see what it looks like on the ground. Some of you may be more familiar than others, so apologies if some of this is redundant. To start with, this is a process that you all are very familiar with because it is currently in this stage of the site plan approval process. So before anything can happen on the ground, you have to have an approved plan. And at Harmony Ridge, well, I'll say that the plans are very important because they not only show where things go on the site, but also how they're supposed to be built. And the developer is held to what is shown on the set of plans. So at the end of the development, if things are not where they should be, the locality will have problems with that. And if a change is big enough, you may have to go through another approval process before you're allowed to make that change on the ground. And just not to scare anyone, but our approval process at Harmony Ridge took 3 years, which is a very long time. And I won't get into the factors of why, unless people want to ask about it later. But a much more typical timeline is about a year. And as I understand it, the Southwood site plan is tracking for approval in less than a year. I wanted to start with this schedule that was prepared by our site contractor for Harmony Ridge to give you just a sense of what the major steps are in the site development process. You start with the sort of clearing of the site, installation of erosion and sediment control measures, which I'll talk about in a minute. Then you get to moving dirt around, grading. Then you get to installation of the underground utilities like storm sewer, sanitary sewer, and water lines. And then you get to the things above the ground like sidewalks and streets and retaining walls and that sort of thing. And you may notice the dates at the top of this sheet. We had originally anticipated the site work to take 3.5 months. And that's really if everything goes perfectly. And it ended up taking longer than that. And so I'll kind of touch on some of the things that came up along the way as I go through this timeline. So the first step in a greenfield development is obviously the groundbreaking. And as for many larger development projects, we often have a little ceremony with some of the key stakeholders to get the process officially started. I'll also just call your attention at the bottom of the screen. There's a sort of time bar, so you can kind of pay attention to where we are in time as I go through these various steps in the process. But this is an illustration of what erosion and sediment control measures look like. The silt fence is the most, the easiest thing to see here. Basically, erosion and sediment control is about keeping all of your dirt on the site so that it doesn't end up in local waterways. And there are state regulations that require this, even though it's a good practice, there are state regulations that require this to be not only put in at the beginning of the project, but maintained throughout the project. And the locality will come around and inspect the site periodically, especially after storms, and make sure that no pollution is escaping from the site. So after the erosion and sediment control measures are in, you can start moving dirt around, clearing the site of any vegetation, any structures that are not supposed to stay, and then hauling away material if some sites, like at Harmony Ridge, we had to get rid of dirt. Other sites, you have to bring dirt in from off-site to achieve the grading that is shown on your site plan. And next, the utilities go in. And as I mentioned before, that's sanitary lines, water lines, storm sewer. And this is actually a picture of the water line going in on 5th Street, which required the street to be shut down. It was done at night. But one of the things that came up in our utility installation phase, and this happens more frequently than you would think, the sanitary line turned out to be not in the place it was shown on the plans. And so in order to make a change and put in the sanitary line, we had to have city inspectors come out to the site, approve the new location, document where the line was being put in so that it so that it ended up being reflected correctly on the plans at the end of the day. So that's just an example of how something that is not actually, some of the things you just don't know until you are in the ground looking at what's there. Next, we move to the things above the ground, and this is a picture of a retaining wall that you can see easily from 5th Street. This was another area where we experienced some delay because we wanted to change the material we were building the wall out of from concrete to block. And we had to go through a site plan amendment process because the wall was in the public right-of-way. And that process took several months. And because of the delay, we ended up, the subcontractor who was going to build the wall had to move to another project. And so we had to wait to get back on his schedule to move forward with the wall. And so that is another example of a way that a project could be delayed. So once the site is to its rough grade, that's when you can start putting in foundations. And Dom is more knowledgeable about the foundation process. But I'll just say at Harmony Ridge, we started the foundations before all the site work was complete, in part because we had to, some of the grading we had to do, we needed the foundation walls in to be able to finish. And you would be surprised at how long it takes for 10 foundations to go in. Every foundation is a multiple phase process, and it's also weather dependent, as someone noted. If it's too cold, if it's too wet, the concrete truck can't pour. And so that process at Harmony Ridge took several months to get those 10 foundations in the ground. So moving forward, the next site development milestone is the concrete work, the curb and gutter and sidewalks, followed by the street paving. And even though the sidewalk placement and the street paving happen in a day, it actually took us about 6 or 7 months to get to put the sidewalks and road in, because, well, one of the reasons was because 2018, as you might remember, was one of the wettest years on record, and the ground was so that we had to wait and wait and wait for the conditions to be dry enough for the city to allow us to put the road in. And so once we were ready, we also had to make sure that the engineers and the site contractor and the paving company and the city were all available on the same day to allow the process to get started. And it's so weather dependent that even if it had rained the night before, we would have had to reschedule the paving of the street, which requires rescheduling all those different parties. So you can see how something that seems very straightforward, like paving a road, can actually end up taking quite a long time. So just jumping ahead to see how the site construction process was evolving. Again, Dom will talk about that in just a minute. But once we have started vertical construction, there's still an element of coordination between land development and site develop, or land and construction, in order to get the certificates of occupancy at the end of the build. And that's essentially what you need to allow someone to move into their home. And there are things within the building that the city looks at, but there are also things on the site that the city wants to make sure are safe and accessible for the people living there. So making sure there are sidewalks, driveways, street signs, parking spaces, lighting, all of those things need to be in addition to the home being finished, so that they will give the certificate of occupancy. And so construction and land development will sometimes schedule a meeting months in advance of wanting the COs to make sure that we understand what the city is going to be looking for when they go to issue those COs. And this is just a picture of the almost finished project. I think this photo was from a few months ago, just to see what it looks like. There are things that come in at the very end, sometimes after the first residents have moved in, like landscaping, street or lights, walkways, balconies. And Dom, maybe this is a good point to transition to what's involved in the construction process. But that's sort of an overview of what the major phases of site development are. And I can answer questions about it later on. Dom, do you have control of the screen?
Mandy, maybe if it looks like you're still controlling the screen, but if you could just change the slides for Dom,
Sure.
that might work.
Yeah.
Unless Dom, you can take over.
Oh, I forgot you were just on. I can.
All right. Sorry. So when I had control of Mandy's screen, I couldn't figure out how to unmute my Zoom thing. So anyway, so we handle, the construction team handles basically the home, so inside of each individual property line. So we see it through kind of these major stages. We'll usually take it over. You know, Harmony Ridge was a little unusual in that we did the foundations while site work was going on for a variety of reasons, but usually just about everything is hopefully done, sometimes not, but before we come in and start working with contractors to put in the foundations. But then from there, we'll begin framing, usually do the insulation that goes on the outside of the house, set doors and windows. Most often, we'll start doing exterior trim, siding, things like that at the same time that a lot of the interior systems, so electrical, mechanical, and plumbing are getting installed by contractors inside of the house. Then about halfway through, if things go right, typically about halfway through, we'll get those systems inspected and also our framing inspected. And then we move on to finishing up whatever siding and trim needs to get done on the outside of the home. But then we do, you know, we start working on all the interior finishes. So the drywall, the painting, the interior finishes, cabinets, things like that. What make us a little unique is obviously the volunteer component in what we do. This is just, we don't have to go through everything, but a kind of a list of what it is that we'll do on a typical build with volunteers versus subcontractors. So as you can see, we do a majority of, you know, majority if you itemized out, but all of the things that require licenses. So electrical, plumbing, foundations, you know, things along those lines. We will work with contractors to typically do, you know, a set of homes at a time. So we take volunteers kind of from all over the community to work on our homes. We typically, you know, we have right now, I think we have 3 separate teams. We have one team, for example, that worked on the Harmony Ridge build. I don't know why this got a little bit little kind of turned around, but we usually work with one team of about 3 to 4 staff members, work over the course of about a year for every 7 to 10 homes, with somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 to 3,000 volunteers over the course of that year to put together a variety of different types of homes. So typically we'll arrive on site in this kind of stage. Usually the first third of the project, we work to kind of get it framed up, insulated, and doors and windows on. Then we get it to this stage, kind of about 2/3 of the way through, and then the last third is trying to get all the interior works and everything else finished and looking right. Typically on our builds, or when we're out there working on homes, we have a few different folks out building with us. So we have a construction supervisor assigned to every different site. So at Southwood, for example, it'll be broken up into, each phase will probably be broken up into 6 or 7 different sites. They're usually fenced off and sectioned areas. Each one of those areas will have a supervisor or a project lead assigned to each different area. They'll have a group of construction crew leaders. These are typically staff or volunteers that come out on a regular basis, or staff that come work with us for usually 1 to 2 years to try and actually learn construction, or just as kind of a way to help give back to the community. Then we've got a group of midweek crew volunteers and volunteer crew leaders. These make up our core volunteers. These are folks who want to come out and build either every week, twice a month, once a week, some sort of time period that they can commit to do however often. They generally become a little bit more skilled because of how often they come out, and these are really the ones that we look to do more of our skilled tasks. Then we have typical volunteers, folks who come up from all different walks of the community to come out and help us, stand walls, build walls, side, drywall, do kind of most of the bulk tasks. So again, I don't know how this kind of got broken out, but a typical team has this sort of average weekly breakout. So a project lead will work with 3 to 5 crew leaders, 25 to 100 volunteers a week to do 10 homes. Then we've had up to 4 teams before. Hopefully by the time we get to Southwood, we're hoping to have in the neighborhood of 4 to 6 separate teams. But we've had as few as 1 to 2 teams when we have less sites to build on. Well, it kind of depends on how much is going on. One of the more unique pieces of our homes is that we build our homes to one of 2 different types of environmental standards, so either Earthcraft or Energy Star levels. So basically, we've put in a few extra things into all of our homes that essentially make the home quite a bit more efficient. So the example we always give to folks is any home that's built by Habitat, if you stick a fan in the front door, blow air into it, a typical home, nationwide, usually about 25 to 35% of that air escapes. We've got to build our homes to the point where it's about 2 to 3% of that air escapes. So our homes are designed and built to be incredibly efficient, both to help with the environment, but also to try and keep utility and monthly bills as low as possible. We also work very hard to try and build easy to maintain homes. So homes that have, all of their surface features and aesthetic features all are designed to have either a 20, 30-year warranty, so that there's as little annual, monthly, quarterly maintenance that our home buyers need to do to keep the homes up. So that's kind of a high shot at what it is that we do on kind of a daily basis. So I guess if anyone has any more detailed questions, we can go a little bit more in depth. But I mainly wanted you guys to see what often happens is, we'll get the framing up, especially if the weather works right and we do get all of the exterior siding, get the home basically looking from the exterior complete. We're typically only about halfway to 60% complete project. So what very often happens is we'll get homes looking, and it's happened a few times at Harmony Ridge, but we'll get a few homes looking nearly complete, or we'll get some homes looking complete and before we start working on the exterior of others. Just because the home looks like it's complete on the outside, there's still quite a bit of work going on the inside. So we've had it both ways. People wondering why we've stopped making progress when we're working inside when we haven't finished someone's exterior shell, or vice versa, where we'll get the shell complete, so the siding, windows, everything else, and people are often surprised to find out, even though it looks finished, why we still have a few months to go. So, but on average, we look to turn all of our, we look to turn our units over in roughly about a year. Sometimes it goes faster, sometimes slower, but that's from where Mandy turns it over, so pre-foundations, to when hopefully we'll get that CO. But you never know.
Awesome. Thank you, Dum and Mandy. So I think next up is Rush.
Correct. So I will keep this as short as possible so that we can go into some smaller groups, because I'm sure this has been a lot of really good information, and I'm sure that folks have questions that they want to start to surface. And so we'll do a lot of that in the small groups that you're working in. But I will share a little quick presentation. So we've talked now about what it looks like generally once construction starts, or what construction generally looks like for Habitat. Are you guys looking at my presentation now? Just a thumbs up. Okay, great. Got some thumbs up. So let's talk a little bit about what we think this process of first developing the site and then going up and starting to build the walls and the roofs and the houses is going to look like specifically here at Southwood. So as always, I like to start with an orientation so we know exactly where we're talking about. Looking at this on the screen, you see all of Southwood here where all of the mobile homes are, and in green with the pretty drawings on top is this first phase that we're developing. And so if you remember from our code of development, we have a number of blocks that we defined that make up that first phase. And tonight we're going to be really focusing in and talking about Village 1. We've been spending some time the last few weeks talking about Village or Block 12, which is up here along the entrance to Southwood along Hickory Street. So now we're going to focus more, if you came into Southwood, on the existing entrance, and eventually what you'll be able to do is turn right on a brand new road that hasn't been constructed yet, drive down that road, and you'll end up there then in Village 1, which is the neighborhood that you guys have really focused in on helping us design. So let's review Village 1 really quickly. As we have been discussing, the site plan, so Mandy showed a picture of the black and white drawing that was the site plan for Harmony Ridge that took 3 years to get approved, and that was a very strange situation. It should not have taken that long. We are in a very different position here. The site plan that we have for Village 1 for Southwood, we're resubmitting. Craig and Bruce and all of the engineers and architects, they will be resubmitting that to the county next week early. And we expect approval of this first neighborhood and the ability to begin all of that site work that Mandy described by late summer or early fall. So it will have taken us a year from our first submission, you guys may remember, in October of 2019, to completion of that approval process this fall. And so site development and vertical construction will follow, and that also will take, like Mandy described, about a year before you'll start to see the walls come out of the ground. So we're talking about fall of 2021 that you'll start to see the houses come out of the ground. So we have 49 affordable houses in total in this first neighborhood. You'll see them kind of with the ones that have the shadow line, so it looks like they're kind of coming out of the ground in this drawing that you have. Harmony Ridge, if you remember the example that Mandy gave, had 10 affordable houses in total. So as you can imagine, it's going to take a little bit of time to build all 49 of those houses. That's more than 3 times the number of houses that are at Harmony Ridge. Let's go over what types of housing we are going to see in those 49, what makes up the 49 houses. So highlighted here in green at sort of the top half of the picture, those are 20 condo units. So we have 20 condos. Highlighted here in orange are 18 townhouses. Then here, oh, I guess that one was red technically. This one is orange. Should maybe make the colors a little more different. That's on me. But these 8 are the attached duplexes, the attached housing. And then we have 3 detached units as well. So that's what makes up the 49 affordable units that we are planning to construct, and that the site plan is specifying or asking permission to build, that we are working on right now with the county. I've also highlighted here, you see these 4 little squares in purple. Those are optional. They actually won't appear on the site plan because they're optional. Mandy kind of talked about this, but one of the things that's really true about site planning is once you draw something in a site plan, we either build that for sure, or you will have to go back to the county and ask for permission not to build it. So anything that you think is an option or something possible, but you're not sure you want to do it and it's not required, it is best not to put it on a site plan so that you can do it if you want to, but if you don't end up doing it, you won't get penalized basically in time by the county. So those 4 units are what we've been calling the additions. They're the, if somebody is interested in purchasing through the Habitat program some extra space where they could maybe rent out housing or have a small business that is allowed by the zoning, then that's where those could happen. So they may or may not get built, and that totally depends on interest from you guys, from the folks that will actually be living in that neighborhood. So this is the whole picture together, color coded. So the condos, the red are townhouses, the orange are the duplexes, and the blue are the detached, and those little purple boxes are those optional units that may not get built.
We're on slide 10 now for people who are on the phone.
Oh, thank you, Joe. Sorry. Yeah, so now we're moving on to slide 10. So within each of those types of housing, there are also different levels. And hopefully this is super familiar because you guys are each working with your own financial coach through the community engagement office, that even within the different types, there are levels 1, 2, and 3. And level 1 we know is the smallest unit, level 2 is a slightly larger unit, and then level 3 is that same larger unit but with something extra. Sometimes it's because it's going to have a larger piece of property, it's going to have maybe a balcony that something else doesn't, another unit didn't have, maybe it's got a better view or a different location or site. So it's very site dependent what makes something a level 3 versus a level 2. And as we've started to actually lay out the neighborhood, we've started to understand what's 3, what's 1, what's 2. But I will say, just like the overall mix of condo, townhouse, attached housing, the number of units in each of those types comes directly from the financial coaching you guys have been doing. So as you guys said, hey, I'm interested in a townhouse or I'm interested in a condo, that's where the overall mix comes from. And then also you guys have been telling your coaches, I'm most interested not just in a townhouse, but a townhouse level 2 or a townhouse level 3. And so we've also made these levels related to exactly what you guys have been expressing an interest in. So that's where the levels come from. And I mostly introduce the levels less to focus on them because we can talk more about why these are level 1s or level 3s when we talk more about the Habitat program, which will be a future meeting. But the reason I introduce the levels is because it helps me talk about how we're going to build those 49 units. So we can't build 49 houses in one day let alone 1 year. It's got to be done in parts. And so what you see in front of you on slide 11 is a red outline that circles the units that we think right now are going to be the first ones we build in this first village. And so you'll see it's all of the condo units, and it's then some of the townhome units. And the shape looks kind of funny. I don't even know. It looks like a backwards question mark, maybe. Or backwards 7. But you might think, like, why would you draw such a weird outline? The thought behind it is you can see, particularly in the townhomes, it means that we have a variety of levels being built at the very first, so that we aren't building all one type of house or all one level of house, so that there's more opportunity for people who are interested in different types and different levels of housing to get to move into these first houses. So we anticipate building these 29 houses in the first step. The condo units, those 20 units, we will more than likely get a lot of help from subcontractors. So Dom talked about the work we normally do with our volunteers through the regular Habitat program, and then the work we typically do with subcontractors. We will probably subcontract a lot more of the condo units to speed it up. Dom talked about also how we have anywhere between 2 to 4 teams, and we hope to have more on the side of 4 teams operating by the time we're building at Southwood. But one of the things we can do to speed things up, in addition to having more teams, is to subcontract some of the work. So we can build more faster to get things going at Southwood quickly, because we know that's really, really important. So we think that this number of units, these 29 units, are going to take something like 18 months to build, so a year and a half to build. It's also possible that you'll start to see some of these detached houses or duplexes get built as these townhomes are getting built, because sometimes you get to a certain point on a townhome, you need to pause with the volunteers so that the subcontractors can do their work. And it makes a lot of sense to be able to jump over and do some work on a smaller house that's nearby, because you've got the crew there, you've got people who are trained to do it. So these lines also may be less hard lines and be more blurry in the end. So you might see some of these other units start construction while we're still finishing this first pass. And then the second group is the remaining 20 that make up the full 49 units that we'll be building. And you'll see, again, it's all of the different levels of townhomes, and then all of the attached and detached housing as well getting constructed in that second section. And we think that's going to take about a year to get done. So from start of seeing walls come out to this point, we think is something like a 3-year time frame. And I want to say, we know all of that has a big giant star by it, as Mandy and Dom just did a really great job of illustrating. These timelines are subject to being sped up because of good things and being slowed down because of challenges. And so we just have to be very flexible and in communication with one another, so that you guys know what we know about the timeline and have all of the same information that we do. So that was a ton of information that we just shared with you about both the general process and then what we think is specifically going to happen at Southwood. I know now the plan is for us to be able to break into smaller groups so that we can actually discuss some of this information and get some questions going from you guys to ask of Dom and Mandy and myself. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you, Rush. So I'm going to break you into groups, and what you're going to do in your group is brainstorm come up with a list of what questions you have about this information. The facilitators are not going to answer your question right away. You guys are going to put all of your questions down on a list, And then we'll come back as a group because people probably have some similar questions in different groups. And then Dom and Mandy and Rush will answer their questions as a group. So this is just for you to brainstorm what questions you have and make sure they all get down on the list. Some of the questions we might hold on to for later because today we're really going to focus on the questions that Dom and Mandy, that are specifically for Dom and Mandy. So there may be some questions that relate more to like the Habitat program. That's fine, you should ask them, we'll write them on the list, but we might not answer them until a future meeting, but we are writing them all down to make sure that we get them. So I was talking too fast, sorry, Marta. So I'm going to send you into your breakout rooms and I'm going to give you a little over 10 minutes to talk and then I will call you back. So here we go. Okay. So for those of you who would like the Spanish translation, you'll need to go ahead and select that again. Oh, hold on, I have to start it. Oops, no. Para los que necesitan la traducción en español, tienen que elegir otra vez el canal de español. So, what we're going to do to make sure that we get, oh, yes, Marta. Yeah, can everybody hear Marta? ¿Pueden escuchar a Marta? Los que han elegido el español. No.
It says she's muted, Molly.
Ah. There we go. How about now? Pueden escuchar a Marta ahora. So what we're going to do is, so that we make sure to get to each group, we're going to go one at a time to each group, and I'll have you start with what the biggest sort of question that your group had was. We'll start with that, and then we'll go get to some of the other questions. But I just want to make sure we get to everybody's most important question. So let's go backwards this time. Let's start with group 3. That's Jordan's group. Jordan, what was the most important question or topic for your group?
So probably participation in construction. So, and which I don't know if you want me to pick something else or if that's a good one for Dom and Mandy. Like in resident participation in construction, like
sure.
What do they get to do? Is there training for what they do?
Sure.
Do they put in the electrical wiring, or is that someone else?
No, well, possibly, but it's not all that likely. So, of all the tasks that I had on that slide, and I'm happy to send it out if people want to see. But so things like the framing, roofing, low roofing, siding, drywall, painting, flooring, things like that, we do with volunteers, and we actually have sort of a training program that people can come learn how to use. You know, for most of our home buyers, we do sort of like an orientation training, a tool training, and one other, I think, a basics safety training for all the folks that will be coming out regularly, and home buyers, I mean. But then pretty much day of, sometimes if it's going to be like a really big day, we'll have independent trainings ahead of time. But for the most part, we spend about the first half hour to 45 minutes going through trainings on whatever task people are going to be coming out for. So when we're building, we'll actually provide kind of be posting a schedule for whoever's about the different homes, so that if there's particular tasks people want to be involved in, they can be. But for the most part, if we're working on, your home, if we're working on your site and doing a particular task and people want to be involved, we always want that from the home buyers that are there. So, we'll always make sure that if you want to come out and work on part of it, we can. But don't worry about how much experience people have and everything else. I mean, for the most part, our staff they're specifically trained and work very hard at being good teachers in all this tasks. So the people that are leading the different tasks and different crews, they've actually needed to not only learn the task, but actually how to teach and train others on how to do the task, and obviously how to do it safely. So you absolutely can be as involved as you'd like, and as not involved as you'd like, I guess, as well, although you won't need to be involved in some extent, but as involved as you'd like, and we'll walk you through every step of the way. That's actually the part we're here for. So I don't think there was another participation one. Yeah.
Great, thank you, group.
And then I guess for some of the decisions, some of the layout questions and things like that, and I guess this can kind of do some of the appliance ones at the same time. So there are things in every home, so design features, certain cabinets, appliances, things like that are standard in every home we've got. Washer dryers are one of the standard ones. They come with a stove, microwave, and refrigerator. And then we have a few options that every homeowner is able to select from. So the way it works is we have a point system. Everyone gets a certain number of points. I don't remember exactly the number. And then everything kind of has a group of points assigned. So a dishwasher is a certain number of points if you want to upgrade to that. Certain types of engineered hardwood flooring, ceiling fans anywhere on the first floor, in certain rooms on the first floor, they're standard upstairs. And then the inverse of that, as far as mini blinds, those are all things that people can select. So we'll actually sit down with you when you go to select which unit you're looking at, and we'll walk through kind of what options there are and allow you to kind of run through that selection process. So then once you select them, we do ask that once it's locked in that we don't change things, just because we start ordering things and everything else from there. But so for the most part, the only dishwashers can be in a home. It's an option to have it in a home. It'll be one of the selections. All the other spot, I'm trying to think, I can't think of any other appliances. An ice maker would be the only other one that's on the selection form, not standard. But everything else will be all Whirlpool appliances.
Okay, thanks.
Can I ask a question? Does that include countertops also? Do you have to have points for different countertops?
Nope.
Or are they all the same?
No, so I'm sorry, the cabinets, the kitchen cabinets are standard, the countertops are standard. There's a few different color packages you can get. So right now on our current homes, for example, there's 3 different packages of, a couple different colors of cabinet color, fridge colors, and counter colors that have all been sort of matched together in a way that looks good. I'm just not my area of expertise, but someone who knows design really well puts the different pieces together and then offers it in 3 to 5 packages. And so you can select which countertop you want, but as a standard, everyone gets a countertop. Does that make sense? The color is a selection, but you get one automatically. You don't need to use.
I'm talking about type. Is there a standard type that you get?
There is.
Okay.
They're all the standard Formica countertop.
Standard Formica, not granite, not okay. Got you. That's all.
No, wait. So, as of right now, we're currently using Formica. There's someone's trying to work on a relationship with International to actually get a granite option that we're providing, but I can't. It was in the works pre-COVID. Now I don't know where it stands.
Oh man.
I know.
Okay.
We're rooting for it too.
Yeah, because they last longer, they stand up better, and they're more efficient. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Now, I will say, even though the countertops are Formica, so we don't We actually go with we don't go with the typical contractor's grade cabinets. We do get custom made cabinets from actually right now Better Living, but there's a certain type of cabinet that we do install, and it's not, it's not the typical kind of basement priced contractor's cabinet, only because we put a lot into the ones that we purchase, only so that we can kind of guarantee that they'll last that 20, 30 years. So
Okay.
the cabinets are pretty good quality.
Okay.
Dom, a related question that Wanda put into the chat box, since we're talking about the point system and the selections, she's asking, how do you get points, and does everyone get the same amounts? It might be helpful to give a little bit of background there.
Sure. So everyone gets the same amount of points. I want to say it's roughly comes out to being about 4,900, so about $5,000 of options. So everyone gets the exact same amount, and then options can change from house to house, from design to design, just because of what we can fit and what we can't. Also, from year to year, quite honestly, the options can change. So, so we've offered bamboo flooring in the past when we were able to get bamboo at a kind of discounted price. We've now got a pretty good price on engineered hardwood, so we're putting those in on the next round of homes. And so we usually try and go, it's all based on the same dollar amount, but some changes can kind of come up based on what we can get, what we can't. So carpeting is a really good example. From one year to the next, we can't offer the same colors because it's always up to whatever distributors are offering. So for the most part, the category will always be offered from family to family. The individual actual item or the look or aesthetic can change year to year, but it's all based on a certain dollar amount, and each point is, I believe, $30 a piece. So point roughly equals $30.
So if you're building like a condo for someone who's handicapped that needs special things, is that sort of like an upgrade to points, or is that something that you can standardly build into the home because it is a handicap home?
Yeah, so if someone does have a recognized disability, we'll provide all of the ADA upgrades that are required. We will obviously provide, but it's not part of the point system. We do have a few things that we may work with that family on doing outside of what's required by ADA. So additional things that families might want that we may work with that person independently. But all of the things recognized by ADA and Fair Housing Act, we will provide across the board with no point. So the cabinets will be lowered, the handles, we change out the doorknobs, all that kind of stuff, and still to provide it wouldn't take any points away.
Thank you.
Yep. And if it comes up, we'll remind you when we get close to, just make sure that comes up during selections.
Okay.
Dom, I think related to this, looking through the questions, I feel like we're doing this a little different than we planned, but since we're rolling with it, there was also some questions. We've talked a little bit now about the interior selection of finishes, so countertops or cabinets. There were also some questions I'm seeing about the layout overall of the Habitat house, and is it a set layout, or are there changes or options within that?
There aren't layout options necessarily. One of the components that go into your home may at times, especially when we're talking about framing and actually constructing the walls and putting layout, may have been done ahead of time. So basically the layout, I don't know how we'll probably work the selections there. I don't know how far in advance people will select their particular unit, but the designs will be established before we sit down for selections. And at that point, once we really start putting in the foundation, we don't have a whole lot of flexibility to change much about the layout. If there are things that are selectable, there are some cases where So we had a access door to get into a crawl space one time that we gave people an option of where they wanted to put it. There've been a few other minor things that, by the way the design came out, we needed to, we needed to have someone's homeowner's input, but for the most part, the designs can't be changed just because of too many engineered components to go into it. So that one does come up a lot.
And
Well,
did you say why there aren't a lot of changes in design and layouts? Did I miss that? Like you said, there aren't a lot of changes. What's
Yeah.
the explanation for that?
Well, so there's a lot of things that every design change that gets made has an impact both going backwards and forwards. And so what I mean by that is if we wanted to change where a bedroom was, that would need to go in before, the foundation would need to get changed for it. The roof and floor trusses would need to get changed for it. And all that stuff is done pretty far ahead of time. A lot of the designs and engineering for it. So in a lot of cases, in order to change the layout of homes, not only would we need to get some of the engineering reworked and redone, but we'd have to actually go back in some cases and get permits reissued. And so it ends up causing a pretty significant delay. Not to mention to try and do the sheer number of homes we try and do. There's a reason we make all of the options fall inside of the selections category. We need to be able to take somewhat of a systematic approach to it. And so when we've got 6 different homes that are going in 6 different ways, it can be very difficult for our staff to keep on top of and make sure that we're meeting the demand that's been set. So
I would also add all of those reasons of not customizing every home that Domino just mentioned are super important because we want to build with speed and we want to make sure the housing is it's the same across all of the different houses that we build. Also, before we even get to make those decisions, some of our funding resources for Habitat actually have requirements. So Rose asked a good question about accessibility, and we have built extremely accessible houses, but all of our houses have a certain level of accessibility that comes from our grant requirements. So that is why you see things like a bedroom on the first floor, a full bath on the first floor. So some of those layout choices are also determined by others and not things we can change without then losing that funding source. And so that's another reason that the layout is not very customizable, but we do try to personalize it as much as possible through those point systems and the finish selections so that your house can feel like your house. And then a lot of what we talk to families about is that also once you buy your house, that interior of your house in particular is something that you change even more given whatever interests or skills or relationships you have personally. So if you don't have that granite countertop because it's not what we do, but you have an ability to go back later and do something like that, since it's your house, you can make those kinds of upgrades and changes as you live in it. I feel like there's another theme I'm seeing in the questions about, I heard it, I know in our group, and I see it in some other groups, just wanting there's still that real interest in seeing it happen and momentum and when it's going to start. And so people are asking, when are we going to start clearing land? When is that going to happen? And then from the moment we start clearing land, when are we going to see those first houses get built? Like, what's the timeline from starting to clear the land to having the first completed house? So Dom or Mandy, I don't know if you want to take a stab at that. I can talk about it too, but.
Well, I can address the sort of starting piece, and maybe Dom can chime in with the construction piece. But in terms of when we can start moving, obviously we need the site plan approval to begin that. And as Rush mentioned earlier, that's anticipated in late summer, early fall. And so we would expect to begin site work, you know, soon after. And we've currently, I think, budgeted about a year's worth of sort of horizontal site work before vertical construction would begin in the fall one. And then that Rush pointed out that first phase of, let's see, 29 units would be built over an 18-month period. And so that would include the condos, which will most likely be built by subcontractors, and then 9 Habitat built units. Our typical construction timeline, Dom, from foundation to completion, I'll let you say that range.
I always struggle with it, but it takes about a year. I would say typically from when Mandy hands off, which is anywhere from beginning of site work to end of foundations, usually about a year later, we'll be able to have families into homes. You know, keep in mind, once the home is finished, that doesn't necessarily mean it's move-in ready or that it's ready to close. There's still zoning and a lot of things done off-site or around the site that need to happen. So in some cases, we can finish a unit and still have some requirements for the general site before we can actually get something that legally allows us to close or have people living inside the home. But on average, it can take a little longer, a little shorter, but not too much. So about 12 months is the current running average.
So you're saying from moving dirt, that's what my question, from moving dirt till the first one ready to move in is about 2 to 2.5 years.
Correct.
Very reasonable.
And so we haven't even started moving dirt yet. So attacking on more time to that. So do you know about how soon we are to moving dirt? Does anybody know?
Mandy and I have both, I think, spoken to that a couple of times. So we submitted our first site plan last October, and we expect to have approval by this fall. So it's about a 1-year process to get site plan approval. So that's talking about starting to move dirt at the end of this year of 2020.
And then at the end of 2020 and like 2.5 after that. So between 2 and 2.5 after that, before the first family can move in, is what you're saying. So it's more like maybe 2.5 to 3 years from this point, or from when the site plan gets approved.
It's 2 years from when the site plan gets approved. So yeah, 2.5, well, not really a half full probably, but yeah, and we'll see that in 2022, people being able to move into their houses. And Dom, I think you started to kind of talk about this, but I see a question from group 1 that is very related to this question of, they talk about what's the process for homeowners moving in, and I think, will they move in when their home is done, or do they need to wait to the end? And you started to kind of talk about this where, do all 49 units have to be finished before the first homeowner can move in? What's the sequence there?
Yeah, so all 49 don't need to, we don't need to have all 49 done for the first family to move in, but there are cases where they're a little bit closer together. And so, if we're building a duplex, for example, usually the property around it needs to be done before we can turn those two over. On a 6-plex, for example, we can break them up, so we don't even need to have all 6 done in order to turn over the first one. But what we do need to have is this site work portion of it complete. So if all of the site work zoning is done before we got started, then as soon as we finish a unit, we can basically turn it over. But usually there's a few things due to how utilities come in and everything else. Usually some of that needs to get done in the middle or after we're done building. So those are the cases where all of the units that share one envelope. So if it's a 6-plex, those 6 units. If it's a duplex, those 2 units. The units that share an envelope, we can't get too far ahead of each other, but but we don't need them all to be done. we don't need the inside or the anything that happens inside of the envelope to get done in order to turn over the first one. It's just site things. So to get a CO, we need two things: past inspection for a unit and a clearance of site work.
And Dom, if I was gonna, I think this is accurate, but you and Mandy can correct me, but the reason behind that is from the city or the county's view, they want to make sure that a family that's moving into that unit has a safe place to live. So they don't want a family moving into such an active job site that it's a health or safety risk. At the same time, it doesn't have to be completely done with a manicured lawn and all of the plants in. There's somewhere in the middle, and Mandy talked a little bit about this of one of the places where Harmony Ridge has gone really well is that you can sit down, in our case with the county, in advance of that, ahead of that time, and really say, what are the things you're going to want to see to be able to give us those COs, so that there's a really clear list and you don't end up at the very end with you thinking you're about to be able to give someone a certificate of occupancy and the rules or the county asks for something else or wants to see something different. And so those meetings can be really helpful to make sure the process is as smooth as possible. I think we've hit on most of the things, except I do see a question from group one as well related to all of this timeline stuff, where people are concerned about what's going on currently with the virus being a delay for the overall timeline. I can speak to things from the planning end, but then I'd also really be interested, you know, Dom and Mandy, who are actually doing the construction work still in this new environment, they can speak a little bit to what they're seeing on the construction side. But from a planning side, there's been no slowdown for us in getting the approval. The county has been turning around their comments just as fast as they promised to. Our engineers have been responding to those comments just as fast as we originally planned. And so our timeline to be able to start or get that approval hasn't changed because of coronavirus, which is good news. But I don't know as much what it looks like on the construction side of things, although I do know from a meeting, and Wanda's raising her hand because she knows some too, but I would, from a meeting that I had with the county, with county leadership, the like executives, they've wanted construction, and construction has continued throughout the shutdown as sort of as an essential activity. It's never been completely shut down because of the importance of continuing to move things along. That's coming from their leadership. I don't know how it's worked on the ground. So anyway, that's my answer.
Yeah, I don't know on Mandy's side. I know that there's been a big push in the construction industry to try and keep construction open, but the only reason I can't speak to how much this is going to have an impact because we haven't started to see yet the material side of things. So unfortunately, transportation, manufacturing, steel has become an issue just for a lot of reasons recently. But a lot of the materials, a lot of the commodities, lumber, steel, rubber, things like that, a lot of things that we put into homes there's going to be an effect somewhere along the line, if not to the material, somewhere in the supply chain. A lot of people are talking now about what to expect, 3, 6, 9 months from now. And it sounds like it was trending to possibly get a little bit worse than we were expecting, but it sounds like it's not too severe. We haven't seen anything yet, but I don't want to feel comfortable saying there won't be any sort of impact. I just don't know what the impact is going to look like and whether or not it'll hold. The fact that we're starting to open things up, international put out, kind of gave the word a little, our not parent organization, but the the habitat that sort of connects all the different affiliate that gives their recommendations actually recommended that affiliates, not recommended, but lifted the hold on affiliates building with volunteers. So there are a lot of construction manufacturing places and plants, things like that, that are starting to be able to get back the way, not to the way things were, but are starting to pick back up and meet previous numbers. So it's looking better than it was 2 weeks ago, but I don't know. I don't know anybody who knows how it exactly is going to turn out. But
yeah, and
on the
oh, sorry, Don.
good.
I was just going to
No,
say, I can only speak to what's been going on over the past couple of months. And, you know, site work has really been able to proceed normally because it's largely like one individual out there on an excavator, or people spaced very far apart on large pieces of equipment. And the only slowdowns have really been on the inspection side with, you know, localities having reduced field inspectors and limiting their contact for health reasons. Sometimes it just takes longer to get something inspected, and that can slow things down. We've also experienced some supply chain issues more related to staffing at the plant where things are being manufactured than availability of raw materials. So there have been some delays, but for the most part, we have, I think, 4 or 5 sites going right now, which is more than we have in the past probably 3 years. So,
so we are 10 minutes over. I'm aware. And so I will try to wrap this up. If there were any questions that you feel like didn't get answered at all and you are dying to know, we would be more than happy to follow up. I see the comment, Joe. And then the Rose has asked who gets to name the new roads. That is a great question, and it is a discussion. It's a discussion topic that we will be going into in a future meeting, because it's actually a requirement of the county for the roads to have names. And we want to talk about how we want to name them and what we're going to do there. So, so Wanda suggests Espada Street. I don't know who that's named after. But so great question, and we won't answer it tonight, but it is on the list of things that we're going to talk about soon, because we do need to answer that question. So really, really good question there. So do you guys have, let's see, I'll do some really quick next week stuff. No meeting next week. So thank you for staying over this week, and you're rewarded by not having to meet with us next week. On June 11th, we are hoping to be able to have the builder who will be building the market rate housing alongside the affordable come to that meeting. That's not for sure yet, but we think that we will have someone both selected by that time, and then have them have the ability to put together a presentation to share with you all, and for us to give you guys an update on what they hope to build, so we can get your feedback. And to a suggestion that Wanda made a couple months ago, we'll be able to send you some of those materials in advance, so you can take a look at it and think about it and come with whatever questions or you have. So we'll let you know. That's not for sure yet, but that's what we think we'll be doing on the 11th. And then the following week, on the 18th, we will likely be turning our attention to talk again about the HOA and ARB. So you may also remember that a couple weeks ago, we asked people if they cared to talk about the HOA and ARB anymore, and a lot of you said no. So that may be an optional meeting for folks who do really want to keep talking about HOA and ARB. But for those of you who are not as interested, we will be able to skip that meeting. Wanda wants me to name the builders. We are not under contract with anybody, and so I cannot name who they are, but we won't be under contract by the 11th either, but by then we would have selected who we think we'll go to contract with, but we actually have not made that selection yet. So I can't share that until we have, but as soon as we've selected somebody, you guys will be able to ask them questions and tell them what you think.
Let me know too. I'm curious too.
Yeah, it's not just, we're not keeping it for, and then there's one more thing we wanted to do tonight. If people have the energy to stick around for like 5 more minutes, if you don't, you can go. But Jordan is really interested. She's done a lot of coordination with this new partnership for the food you guys got tonight. And so we were hoping to ask you our opinion on what you thought about the food and what you want to see in the future. So I'll hand it over to her.
Thanks, Fresh. So this should be pretty quick. Food is generally more straightforward than construction, although I'm sure you can keep it if you want. So we're working with, there's this little grocery store in Belmont that's called Keeble and Keeble. And they, like many other stores, had to close down during COVID. But rather than doing something temporary and then planning to open back up, they've entirely changed what their business is doing. And what they decided to do is to provide meals to all sorts of organizations and communities in Charlottesville that need the support without cost. They've expressed interest in supporting us. And so we usually, we purchase a meal for our meetings every week, which is something we genuinely love doing because it's good to share with you all. But to have someone come and say that we'll give you fresh cooked food for free, we were like, okay, that sounds pretty good. So we decided to give it a try. Tonight is the first night that we had their Domino's. So we'd like for some feedback from y'all, because they are very curious to hear what you think of it, because this can be a very, like, if you say, we'd rather have this, I'd rather see this on the menu, they're very interested in hearing what you want to eat in particular. So the first thing, we're gonna come up with a poll for y'all to see what you thought of tonight's food. So it was pork belly, bok choy was the veggie, and then it was cheesy grits was the meal. So if you can pick one of the options, I loved it, would have it again. It was all right, maybe have it again. I only like the meat, I only like the veggies. I didn't know there was gonna be grits, so you can include that with veggies if you want. Or I didn't like it and wouldn't have it again. So give you a couple minutes for that. If you're on the phone, you can just express your opinion if you want.
And be honest with us, guys, so that we
Very
can,
honest. You will not hurt our feelings.
No, we won't take it personally.
And
I only like the meat.
Joanne only liked the meat.
That was it. I'm not a grit person.
If you weren't raised on grits, you seldom like them.
No grits. No, I'm from the north. We don't eat grits. So.
I'm with whoever that is.
Joanne.
Like it.
We eat grits in the South, but no cheese in my.
Well, we don't eat grits. Period. North.
I found that people in the South eat grits, and they're also very independent and particular about how they want them.
Yes,
that's
Yeah,
probably
but you
true.
don't put no cheese. You don't put cheese in the grits.
Rose, that's the only way I like grits.
You put a little bit of butter.
See?
I only want them with cheese and butter because
Reel
otherwise they're
down
poor.
south. I know, but if you reel down
Marta,
south, they don't
Marta
even do
can't
anything.
translate. Marta can't translate. She's trying to keep up with the
I
conversation.
know, but I was
she
telling
can't.
Marta it's bored. She doesn't need to translate.
Rush, have people voted?
Have people voted, Rush?
I'm not in charge of the
Es que a ti
voting.
te gusta la cosa.
I mean, I didn't do the poll.
No, no, yo creo que
We have
Porque tiene
so
que
far
ponerlo ahí,
4
¿o qué?
responses.
Okay. Wanda, did you respond?
I did. I said I don't like it. Sorry. I'm
No
on.
Yo ya escogí,
What
Martita.
else they have on the menu? What else do they have on the menu? Do
It's
you
on the
know?
next poll. There's some options on the next poll.
I like last night food.
Oh, you did like last night's food?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
What was it?
which one did you get?
Potato, chicken, green beans. Liked it.
Okay.
But that was a different company.
It was. I misunderstood her question.
But they also wanted
Martita, yo voy a
it.
hacer carne.
Lulu wants tortillas for the meat.
Y lo
All right,
voy a
we can move
acompañar
on.
con una salsa bien picante.
Oh, and the
Even
spicy
though-
salty.
Food
salsa.
today.
Even if it's not a lot of people, we can move on.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Okay.
So people
Yeah,
can
I guess Yeah.
So I'd say generally
Everybody
not.
lied. They lied.
Okay. Well, Wanda, not everyone is you.
They lied. They lied.
Okay,
All right, let's move on to the next one.
We
so
know
that
them
we
by
can
now.
finish up.
Since we voted, we can go, right?
There's one more question, but we can follow up with you about it later, Joanne, if you want to go.
I don't know how to get to the other question, Jordan. Do I relaunch?
Was that one?
I'll do it.
Rush is over it. She wants her grits.
I've got to take care of a couple things, so I'm actually going to sign off. So you all take care.
Bye, nice
Thanks,
meeting you.
Tom.
Very
Bye,
nice.
Dom. Thank you.
Que como
Hi.
pastel de carne.
Well,
I heard her. I heard her.
yeah.
Okay, so the second part is just some options for other meals that you could have that were on their list. This is not the only options, but it's available. Bacon and tomato grilled cheese, spaghetti with red sauce, meatloaf with a baked potato, chicken Caesar salad, pulled pork, or pork chili and cornbread. So select as many of those as you think you would.
Martita, solamente uno.
Nope, as many as you want.
No chile.
Also, you can say it if
Yeah, you can also tell us.
Oh, send them back.
Joanne, did any of those sound good to
Martita,
you?
ensalada de pollo
I
César
think some of them sounded good to me.
y cerdo desmenuzado.
Joanne, I'll follow up with you.
Yo lo voy a poner aquí.
On paper.
I like the
Ahí va.
And I'll talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.
Bye, Joanne.
Bye.
Bye.
I like the tomato grilled cheese sandwich
Okay.
and the meatloaf.
I mean, they all sound good to me, Jordan. I'll give you my address. I'll put it in the chat.
You don't get one.
Wanda,
Amanda.
why do you have to pick the same thing I picked?
Pero lo mandan. Van a ver.
You know what you pick. I'm sorry. Sorry.
Molly, how are we looking?
We've got 8 out of
Only Rush
13.
knows.
You want me to share it?
Anybody else trying to respond?
No,
Okay, go ahead, Molly. What is it?
Chicken Caesar. Wow, I'm surprised.
I'm sure Rush for her. Rush,
I did not
Jordan,
vote.
Amanda. Who else?
All the responses are from Habitat.
we're not allowed to vote.
You don't get to
All of
vote.
you guys voted. I'm
I
sure
can't even press it, Wanda.
A la dieta.
you guys have a tray.
Okay,
Yes.
that's the last thing. Thank you guys. We'll be in touch.
So
Thanks for your patience.
no meeting next week.
Gracias.
You guys do it 11.
Good
night,
everyone.
Be safe.
Cuídense.
Bye, Richard.
Bye.
Adiós, cuídese mucho, bye.
Tell
Bye.
Tiffany.
Richard!
Bye, Richard.